Well, this is a larger subject, but I will only talk about Antonio Sant'Elia because it is his birthday today. An architect who died very young at 28 in the war. And let me read a few words about him. So Antonio Sant'Elia was an Italian architect and a key member of the futurist movement in architecture. You see, he was born on April 30th, 1888, and died on the 10th of October, 1916. So he was 28 years old when he died. He left behind almost no completed works of architecture and is primarily remembered for his bold sketches and influence on modern architecture. And it is true, although he didn't build, but his drawings are continue to be highly influential. The Manifesto of Futurist Architecture was published in August 1914, supposedly by Sant'Elia, though this is a subject to debate in it because of Marinetti, the poet. He worked with Marinetti, Sant'Elia, so there are two versions of that manifesto. In it, the author stated that the decorative value of futurist architecture depends solely on the use and the original arrangement of raw or bare or violently colored materials. His vision was for a highly industrialized and mechanized city of the future, which he saw not as a mass of individual buildings, but a vast, multi-level, interconnected and integrated urban conurbation designed around the life of the city. Between 1912 and 1914, influenced by industrial cities of the United States and the architects Otto Wagner, Adolf Loos in Austria, and the Genoese architect Renzo Picasso, he began a series of design drawings for a futurist Città Nuova, the new city, that was conceived as a symbol of a new age. Many of these drawings were displayed at the only exhibition of the Nuove Tendenze group, of which he was a member, an exhibition in May, June 1914 at the Famiglia Artistica Gallery. Today, many of these drawings are on permanent display at Pinacoteca Como's Art Gallery. So I'll show some of his drawings. They are examples of what is called futurist architecture. It was an architecture that believed in movement, and it believed in technology. It believed in the heroic architecture, able to assert itself thanks to progress, thanks to deeply seated belief in technology. These drawings were masterful, really. I mean, they were done with a very obvious power of expression, but they were also rigorous. They were not just raw sketches. He has a few like those too, but these are well crystallized works, and they do represent a vision. He was a visionary architect, and too bad he died at 28. One of his works was built, but not by him, but by the other futurist architect, fascist architect, Giuseppe Terrani. Now, this is an architecture which is not nostalgic. It's not an architecture that indulges in Arcadia or bucolic visions. No, it is an architecture that proclaims the power of metropolis, of the big modern city. What Sant'Elia teaches us is that even if you don't have commissions, even if you don't have so-called clients, if you have a burning desire of expression in architecture, you can express that burning desire in various ways. You can draw manually or digitally, you can model, you can do videos, you can write essays or manifestos. The truth is, And I believe Le Corbusier was right when he said, architecture is not a profession, but a state of mind. That is, even if you don't have, as I said, clients or commissions or whatever, you can still express that state of mind, which is concerned with architecture almost non-stop. These are very, very nice drawings, and you know, they're actually feasible buildings. They were not built, but one of them was built, and you are going to see it. So even if he died young at 28, here we are talking about him, and we are not the only ones to talk about him. Sant'Elia continues to be relevant because of the beauty of the drawings, and not just the beauty, you know, this is an aesthetical category, but the vitality of his vision, which is, although perhaps no one believes any longer so much in the metropolis in this way, you know, the big highway, as you can see here, but the vision is still fresh, because monumentality is a quality which, when not overwhelming, is welcome and was welcome in any period in history. Now, it is true, today we might, I actually am tempted now to comment on something. We are now confronted, as you know, with climate change, with you know, the melting of the icebergs, with pollution, with sustainability, not to mention the pandemic. This kind of optimistic mega architecture is difficult to sustain today. But why are his drawings still of interest? And I think they are of interest because he touched upon a certain truth and a certain beauty. There is beauty in these drawings. And beauty is beyond, in a way, the discussions about climate change, you know, the melting of the icebergs, pollution, or sustainability. Beauty is, if I am to paraphrase Louis Kahn, who said, order is. I don't think his architecture is an arrogant assault on nature, although, you know, we don't see too much of nature in these drawings. But this sketch that you look at now, became actually a building, is a monument, and it was built by Giuseppe Terrani, and we are going to see it after the death of Antonio Sant'Elia. This one, the monument to the fallen. Here it is, not very far away from what he drew. This is a drawing he did about 30 years, I think, before it was actually built. And this is what Giuseppe Terrani, a very important Italian architect, I think he was stirred up by Marinetti, the futurist poet, in memory of Sant'Elia. So they made the efforts to build a building based on the drawing or vision of Sant'Elia. Now these are images generated based on his drawings, but digitally. So in the present, someone made these renderings based on his drawings. So this is the power of art, as you know. He died, but he didn't die. People still talk about him. Monument was built 30 years after his death. Now, many years, almost 100 years later, people try to generate digital images that are clearly connected with his vision expressed in his drawings. There were all kinds of, in 2017, there was a series of presentations, exhibitions, books published, like this one or this one. So this is why I end now my presentation on him with an encouragement. It's too bad there aren't here too many students, but I would tell them to if they love architecture, to express themselves as accurately as possible, as passionately as possible, and regardless if they receive good grades in school or if they get commissions or whatever. If you love architecture, express that love in whatever form you find appropriate. Just as Sant'Elia did, until he was 28 when he died. Now, this is something else. I will not show this. And now I go to the second presentation today on Hans Poelzig, a very interesting German architect. And it is his birthday as well. Well, he lived much longer. Well, not. He could have lived even longer. So he died at 67. But he built a lot and he drew a lot, and he had a complex personality, and you'll understand why I'm saying this. This was the man, Hans Feldsig, a man who also did stage design for film. And so he assumed the seventh art besides architecture. And this makes him additionally interesting for our time, I would say. He had a Gothic side, so to speak, to his work, but he also had, he was also some kind of architect who had social concerns. So thus, you could say he was also a social worker in architecture. But he was an expressionist architect. And so expression was highly important for him. Some drawings. He drew very well. And, as I said, being an expressionist architect, expression was highly interesting to him. I mean, look at this column. It is flamboyant. No, it is sensuous. It is expressionistic. And he built it. But he also has drawings which are lyrical, kind of like this one or this one. You would say it's just a rough sketch. Yes, it's a rough sketch, but it's the seed for an interesting architecture, usually an expressionist architecture. The drawings of Hans Poelzig are highly valued for the history of drawing in architecture, just as Sant'Elia's are, but they are very different. As opposed to Sant'Elia, Hans Poelzig also built, and you will see some of his buildings. This was a project for a competition. Um, the same manual drawings, but very expressive, I would say. The Germans had a number of remarkable architects who, on one hand, had expressionist tendencies and aspirations, and on the other hand, they had social concerns. And as such, I think they are very interesting. And they continue to be relevant, I think, for our time. This, I think, was a project or a sketch for a church or a cathedral. You see there the sign of the cross. Now, we begin with some of his built works. This was an earlier work in Poland, factory. And he has a few buildings like this, which are very interesting. Look at this, you know, it's mysterious kind of, you know, it's almost like you know, a big temple of some sort, you know, but it's a factory, but it has a monumentality which transcends, you know, the usual factory. Or look at this, you know, it's powerful. It's a powerful architecture. Who cares was built, you know, for some industrial functions. A good architect can express, doesn't matter what. You know, you can build a fence, or you can build a bench, you know, you can build a little house, or you can build a mammoth building. If you have something in your heart that needs to be externalized, you can do it. You'll see some very extravagant buildings by him. Now, this was a cinema built in Berlin, Kino Babylon, and it still exists, with apartment buildings above it. Almost 100 years old. Why is it called Babylon? I don't know. There he is, you know, the very interesting film director Milos Forman and Jack Nicholson. Anyway, so this is a cinema in Berlin built by Hans Feldsig. Then this department store from 1912, more than 100 years old, in Wrocław, in Poland. Not bad. Even this, you know, it's a department store, but it has a certain movement and a certain monumentality which transcends the usual banality of department stores. Stage designs. His stage designs are very interesting. And after this, after looking at the stage designs, we'll look at some other buildings that he built, some very important ones. His stage designs are interesting because, on one hand, yes, they are expressionistic, but they are also animated by a dark spirit in a way that one might connect with the Middle Ages, the Gothic. You know, the Gothicist fears, the angst of the pre-Renaissance times. You'll see Der Golem was a famous film, German film, where he did a stage design and some kind of a fright movie, but fright also with a mystical side. An interesting film. And he did the design, the stage design. Now this Maria Ilinca Iorga seems to be Romanian, no? And she wrote a paper on this topic, Hans Poelzig, the design of mystical film architecture. And look at the scenes, that it's a. I mean, we are dealing with a modern architect, but look at what he imagined. It's a dark world. It's a disruptive world in a way. It's a pre-Renaissance world. It's a world that doesn't proclaim the luminous conquest of the human being, of everything else on earth. Quite the opposite. But it's very interesting. Look at the interior, an interior that he imagined, very visceral, very womb-like, very contorted, and in a way very contemporary, because there are buildings built in the present very much in this spirit. Well, this was not an architecture per se, it was a stage design, but it was an architect who imagined this and designed it. Der Golem. Now, some water towers by Hans Feldsig, very interesting, very monumental. I mean, look at this, a water tower. But it's a monument. It's big. It's almost incredibly so. So I'm not saying that he humanized the function of a water tower, but he transcended the limits that usually a water tower has. And look at this, all of these were built by him. Now, if you had in your city just one of these buildings, you would have said this is a very special building. Well, I don't know if they still exist. Probably not. This one, it does exist from 1911. No, I think it was destroyed. I'm not sure. Let's see. And this is different from the previous ones. It was the glory of this place in 1911, but I think it was destroyed. Yes, and the interior is also remarkable. Look at this. Now this is a rendering, but it was built like this. I think I have another image from the interior. Truly, this prosaic building, if we consider its function, is actually mysteriously more meaningful and architecturally more interesting than, maybe even the church in the city, or similar civic buildings. Look at this interior. Is, I think, very, very interesting and sculptural and engaging. Hans Poelzig. Here, he is different from what we saw in the stage design, because, this is a building which didn't have to connect with the Middle Ages or with some kind of a fantastic, mystical story like in Der Golem. Here is still the same architect, very, very capable of bringing drama inside the building. Even a building that usually is not notorious for cultivating architectural dramas. Now this building in Wrocław exists, and it was I think it is a museum now. Now this architecture perhaps is a little bit it has a so-called classical touch. I mean, but it is some kind of it has elements of expressionism, but very very subdued compared to what we saw previously. This cluster of buildings still exists. It's a museum. In Poland. The House of Friendship, unfortunately, it was not built, a huge project, and I think it would have been very, very interesting, but it was not built from 1916. Interesting name, House of Friendship. Huge, it's a hotel, I think. And in Istanbul, yeah, it was not built. Yes, yes, the section. I wanted to arrive at the section. Look at this. It's almost a mini city, but it was not built. Hans Feldsig was good with large programs, you know. Lots of hotel rooms here and other functions as well. It would have been interesting if it was built, but it was not anyway. But maybe we could contemplate again buildings with this very name, House of Friendship. Now this building, which was demolished, it might be that it is the most interesting building that he built. And strangely, it survived the Second World War, but it was demolished afterwards. I will read a little about it because it's a very important building. So it was a theater in Berlin, the Grosse Schauspielhaus, the Great Theater in Germany, often in Berlin, often described as an example of expressionist architecture, designed by Hans Feldsig for theater impresario Max Reinhardt, a very important presence in theater, Max Reinhardt. The structure was originally a market built by architect Friedrich Hitzig, and it retained its external gabled form. It then became the Circus Schumann at Circus Arena. It was renovated by Poelzig and reopened in 1919, contained seating for 3,500 people. Max Reinhardt wanted to attract a working class audience, quite a noble purpose. The large size allowed for people who could pay top prices for the best seats to support low-cost seats in the back of the theater. Painted red, it was a cavernous, domed space and had no balconies, which contributed to its vastness. Its dome and the pillars were decorated with muqarnas, a honeycomb pendentive ornament which resembles stalactites. When illuminated, the ceiling's light bulbs formed patterns of celestial constellations, and the vaulted ceiling took on another concept, the night sky. In the lobby and elsewhere, Feldsig used colorful light bulbs to create striking visual backdrops. This is how the building was towards the outside, but he worked inside. And look at this. You know, it was probably the most funambulesque theater at that time, and maybe of all times almost. And it was demolished. What a pity. You can imagine how this was painted in red. So the Grosse Halle, the Grosse Spielhaus, the great theater in Berlin, built by Hans Poelzig, but unfortunately demolished. And you'll see some pictures during its demolition. You remember the sketch he did of a similar column. Here we see them built. Now I'll show some pictures. In 1919, it looked like this. And in 1942, so 23 years later, it looked like this. And in 1972, I think it began to be demolished. The festival theater for the Salzburg project, I hope I'll come back to the theater. I remember when I created this presentation that I included some pictures during its demolition, but we'll see. This is another project he did in Salzburg for a theater, for a festival theater. And you can tell it's the same man who did the great theater in Berlin. But this one was not built. The mountainous building. Too bad it was not built. An office building from 1924 in Hanover. I don't know if it still exists. It was probably bombed during the Second World War, or maybe I'm wrong. Here I am. I don't know why I thought that this was. He had a few buildings which were destroyed by the war, but this one seems to still be standing. It's not one of his most remarkable buildings, but it's still an interesting and genuine Hans Feldsig building. I like the texture of the brick, the tectonics of the wall. Truly, the brick is a magical material. If you use it with the sensitivity, you can save a building, so to speak. You can do a lot with bricks. Now, he also worked for the Weissenhof estate in Stuttgart. 1926, 1927, the Weissenhof site plan was designed by Mies van der Rohe, who also designed a block of flats. Le Corbusier was present there too, Hans Scharoun and other very important architects. It was a colony of experimental housing. And you see them here, you know, on the side plan. Who's who who's who in architecture at that time. You see Walter Gropius, you know, you name them, they are all here. Joseph Frank, Hans Scharoun, Bruno Taut. Anyway, Mies at the top, he did the side plan. Le Corbusier at the bottom. And this was by Hans Feldsig, very different now from the large projects that he built or imagined for competitions. But this was a house based on squares. You see the plan in the upper right corner. Sketches for the house. Very interesting, no? I mean, artistically charged, so to speak. Much more than the house itself. You look at these sketches and you look at the house and you wonder, you know, is it the same man? But this was the raison d'etre of this colony, to build experimental houses, not necessarily expensive houses, to show the new architecture. But you see, his drawings are astonishing and so different. You know, we look at this and we remember the expressionistic drawings that we saw already. These are different. That's interesting, you know, with color and with, you know, look at this. I wonder if this way he was testing his colored pencils on the paper or something. I never saw such drawings, except in the case of Hans Feldsig. He also designed furniture. Now in Charlottenburg in Berlin, this is a large building. Yeah, look at this. Very large indeed. It was the radio station, the radio headquarters. I don't know how to call it, from 1929 in Berlin, in Charlottenburg, and an impressive building. I mean, its sheer size is astonishing. This is not the only very large building. You will see another one which still stands. The interior is also, I think, very well done. So as opposed to Antonio Sant'Elia, who didn't build, Hans Poelzig, as you can see, did build. Also interesting, the facade, the way it is covered with these ceramic tiles. And, the facade is very regular, but because of the ceramic tiles and the play with various colors, it creates a certain degree of freedom. I personally think either bricks with a certain treatment or finish, or ceramic tiles, they have a great potential in architecture, and they still do, I think. But not just the exterior. Look at the staircase. The staircase also is, if not dramatic, but enticing. Is well built. It has a dynamic form. The trying to replace some damaged parts and bringing in new, it's not easy, but look, they are trying, they were trying. A building in Frankfurt, the Goethe University, now with such a name, we should have the correct building. And I don't know if it is the correct building, but it is a huge building. Look at this. This is the Goethe University in Frankfurt. And it was not, I don't think this was its initial function, but it's a very big building. Okay, that's it for today. So let's wish happy birthday again to Antonio Sant'Elia and to Hans Feldsig. I didn't expect to make a presentation today, but we did it, and